Welcome back to Pokemon Episode Summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 359, Unfair Weather Friends. The episode begins with Ash and the gang heading up a mountain trail on their way to Fort Tree City for Ash's next gym battle. Ash was really admiring the scenery, as there was a trail above him and a trail below him, and it just looked pretty fucking cool. And he was also admiring the sunny weather. It was a very nice day. Suddenly, though, the sunny day comes to an end as a few raindrops drip down. Ash and the gang were startled by the sudden change in weather, so they stopped, but then they start freaking out as it begins to pour. It went from fucking a sunny day to a torrential downpour in like 5 seconds flat. Ash and the gang started to run immensely fast along the trail, heading for a tree just in front of them to take shelter. Unfortunately, though, before they could make it to the tree, lightning struck the tree, knocking it down. So Ash and the gang obviously backed away, scared of being lit on fire by the tree. As quick as it started raining, the rain stopped, and it was replaced by immensely hard snow, which blew into Ash and the gang's faces, making them cover them. Ash and the gang were obviously surprised by the strange weather and questioned what could have caused it when suddenly a Pokemon floats by them, and Ash scans it on his Pokedex to find out that it was Castform, known as the Weather Pokemon. Ash also learned that since it was the Weather Pokemon, it was a Pokemon that could change form depending on the type of climate, and since it was snowing, Ash looked up its different forms and found out that it was currently in its snow form. As the path filled with snow, May wondered what the hell a snow form Castform was even doing out in the middle of nowhere, with Max stating he wasn't sure, but what he did know was that it was probably causing the sudden snowstorm. Brock suggested that if it caused the storm, it could probably help lead them out of it, and hearing this, Ash asked it to, and the Castform nodded, agreeing, and began to hover away, motioning for Ash and the gang to follow, and they did, not wanting to freeze to death. Soon after the gang begins to follow Castform, the weather calms down and goes back to normal. The sun comes back out. Ash and the gang were amazed by this, and wondered if their hypothesis of Castform controlling the storm was actually true, and it seemed as though it was. Since May was the first one to notice, before notifying the others, that Castform's form had returned to its normal form that the Pokedex first showed, confirming that Castform did in fact control the weather that was going on, making Ash and the gang very intrigued by how unique Castform is, because they've never seen a Pokemon like this before. It then turns out that Castform hadn't just led Ash and the gang out of the storm, but it had actually led them to two scientists in lab coats, who immediately ran up to Ash and the gang. One of them was male, and one of them was female, who had a ditto on her shoulder. The two scientists immediately apologized for the sudden weather problems and asked Ash and the gang if they were okay, as Castform then lands on the male scientist's shoulder, insinuating that he was probably the Castform's trainer. Ash and the gang confirmed they're okay, and this leads the male scientist to explain what had been going on. Basically, he and the female scientist worked at a nearby facility known as the Weather Institute, and they were experiencing with a machine that changes the weather. Basically, their main goal as scientists were to find out how to control the weather at will. So, Castform was likely a part of this somehow, but before the male scientist could further explain, Brock was immediately attracted to the female researcher and rushed up to her and started to do his usual flirting routine, leading Ash and May to sigh in annoyance, and Max to prepare to pull Brock away by the ear as usual, but Max stops himself as he noticed that, for some fucking weird reason, the most shocking turn of events in the entire fucking Pokemon saga so far, Brock had stopped flirting, and was instead just sitting there, confused as to what the fuck he was even doing. Ash asks Brock what was wrong, and May asks why the fuck he wasn't doing his usual flirting, leading Brock to reply that something was odd, something just didn't feel right to him about this female scientist, but he couldn't tell what it was. Changing the subject, the two scientists introduced themselves, with the male scientist being Bart, and the female scientist being his trainee, Millie. Ash then introduced himself and his friends in response, and Bart and Millie inquired as to whether Ash and the gang would like to visit the Weather Institute so that they could show them some shit they've been working on, and Ash and the gang were very excited to potentially learn more about Castform, and the scientists want to control the weather, so they happily agreed, and they began their trek to the Weather Institute. Meanwhile, in a nearby forest, it appeared to be snowing very heavily there, and suddenly, Team Rocket pop out of the snow, insinuating that they were just walking in the forest, but then thanks to the snow, they had gotten stuck in it, because there was just so much of it, and they were immensely annoyed by this, as well as the fact that the snow wasn't even stopping, it was just still coming down on them. Jesse and James were so angry that they were looking for someone to blame for getting stuck in the snow, and they settled on blaming Ash and the gang, assuming that they must have caused the snow after realizing that they were trying to follow them as usual, and complained that Ash and the gang had made them come to a snowy area, even though they could just, not fucking chase Ash and the gang. You know that? You could just leave them alone, but nope. Meowth wasn't bitchy at all, though. He was actually really enjoying the cold snow, and he apparently viewed the snow as a nice cold blanket and wanted to sleep with it, but James and Jesse kept him awake by trying to strangle him, informing him that he couldn't rest now, otherwise he would die in the cold. This led Meowth to argue with Jesse and James. As we then see the sky, and it's revealed that a giant cloud was causing all the snow to drop on Team Rocket, but there was only this one cloud. The rest of the sky was completely sunny. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang were led across a bridge at the end of the mountain path they were on that led directly to the Weather Institute building. And once the building was in sight, so was a large satellite that the two scientists called the Weather Control Machine. A very creative name, I know, but as I'm sure you could guess, this is the satellite dish that the scientists used to actually change the weather, so they were the ones responsible for the sudden rain and the sudden snowstorm. Castform more so just transformed because of the sudden changes. Ash and the gang were pretty amazed by the satellite, and Bart complimented Millie, admitting that she did a lot of the recent work related to the satellite, and stated how he was amazed how Millie had done so much to contribute to the Weather Institute in such a short time, and suggest that she would be a very successful scientist when she graduated from apprenticeship and worked on her own fully. Just then, a third random scientist comes up and informs Bart that he was needed so that they could do some more testing with the satellite, and Bart obliges, although he didn't want to leave Ash and the gang doing nothing, so he instructs Millie to take Ash and the gang on a tour inside the actual Weather Institute. Millie happily agrees and takes Ash and the gang inside the Weather Institute, where she gives them a guided tour. As they were all walking down a hallway, Millie explained to them that they stored weather data they collected in a large computer, and they used the temperature and patterns that they collect to do weather experiments to learn more about the overall behavior of weather, and adds that the Weather Institute also specialized in studying natural disasters. Ash and the gang were interested by this, and understood everything Millie was saying. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they had managed to get out of the area that was being covered in snow, although they themselves were still covered in snow, just because there was so much of it. But they had managed to get into some bushes just outside the Weather Institute, so they had overheard the scientists talk about the weather control machine, and were now staring at it in awe, knowing that it must be very useful and important, so they wanted to steal it, cheering, as they declared that they were going to steal the weather control machine for Giovanni, so he could use it for whatever nefarious deeds he desired. Although Meowth began to wonder what Giovanni could even use the satellite for. Basically, it was just a 20-foot satellite. What could Team Rocket even use it for? James suggested that they could just sell it to someone instead, but Jessie suggested that if they weren't going to give it to Giovanni, then she could just use it to make it permanently sunny and permanently get rid of the goddamn snow. Although Meowth didn't think stealing was worth it just for that, so he decided that stealing it for Giovanni would be the best option, and Wobbuffet popped up his Pokeball to agree with this. Suddenly, Team Rocket heard the sounds of helicopters, though, and they looked up to see one approaching in the distance, and knew that they may have had competition for stealing the satellite, and knew that they would have to come up with a pretty good plan to get in, so that they could sneak past both the scientists and whoever was trying to steal the satellite as well. Meanwhile, back inside the Weather Institute, Millie showed Ash and the gang the control room of the Weather Institute, which was a large room filled with many pipes and many computers, including the central computer, which was the most important one for doing research. Ash and the gang were amazed by all this equipment, until Ash then noticed the same helicopter that Team Rocket had saw approaching on one of the computer screens. We then see outside the Weather Institute as the helicopter was approaching, and it's revealed that Shelly, the admin of Team Aqua, was inside the helicopter, because Team Aqua was preparing to invade the Weather Institute, also after their equipment. Shelly wasn't the only Team Aqua member in the helicopter, several of her grunts were as well, and she ordered them to start the stealing operation, and they obliged, as the Team Aqua members went down the helicopter using ropes. Shelly joined them, and as soon as they were all on the ground, they immediately aimed ring guns at all the scientists that were researching the satellite, including Bart, and they surrounded the satellite. After Shelly's order, all the grunts launched the ring guns, and they wrapped around the researchers, capturing them and stopping them from interfering. To prevent the scientists from escaping, Shelly sends out 2 Crawdont to guard them as they land in front of the scientists, and Shelly warns the scientists not to move, or she would hurt them, and she could hurt them very badly. Meanwhile, Team Rocket had went to a hill just above the Research Institute to get a better look at the overall institute, planning to steal the satellite, but they then saw the fact that Team Aqua had gotten off their helicopter, and they were displeased by this, fearing that Team Aqua would steal the shit first, and they were not willing to let that happen, and they decided that they were going to step in and battle Team Aqua. Well, at least Jessie and James did, but Meowth was scared as fuck and wanted to hide. Before Team Rocket could come to an agreement on what to do, they were discovered by some Team Aqua grunts, who were looking around the area for any spare scientists who may have escaped. Team Rocket were not frightened by the 3 Aqua grunts, one of them being a girl with blue hair, and the other 2 being dudes with brown hair, even as the Aqua grunts bitterly questioned who the fuck Team Rocket even was, as Team Rocket just did their motto to reveal themselves. However, Meowth cut off the motto, suggesting that they kibosh it for today, and instead just focus on escaping from the Aqua grunts, but Jessie and James refused to stop their motto, as it was tradition to keep doing it. Meowth reluctantly kept doing the motto as well, but by the time the motto was done, Team Rocket, including Wobbuffet, were captured in rings, just like the scientists. The 3 grunts then escort the captured Team Rocket to where Shelly and the rest of the grunts were, with the Crawdont and the captured scientists, and then the scientists and Team Rocket are placed on a platform surrounded by a moat, to further prevent their escape. Jessie and James demanded to the Aqua grunts that they be released, but the Aqua grunts said nothing, just staring at Team Rocket blankly. Although Meowth gave Jessie and James hope, assuring them that they could escape, since they should totally know how to escape rings, since they'd used rings to capture Ash and the gang before. Jessie then asked James if he knew how they could escape, and thankfully, James got an idea, as he started to take a big breath, sucking in air. At first, this seemed like a bad idea, since it seemed as if he was dying from lack of air. He was turning all wrinkly and shriveled up, like he was going to die. But James' plan worked, as since he had sucked in so much air, this had managed to break the ring, and James began to dance, celebrating his escape. Meowth and Jessie then sucked in air as well, and they got freed from the rings as well, as the rings broke. Jessie then demands that Team Aqua and Shelly step aside so that Team Rocket could steal the weather control machine for themselves, although Shelly was annoyed by this, absolutely refusing to hand over the machine to people as lame as Team Rocket, and instructs one of the grunts to power up the satellite and test it out. The grunt nodded and started to fiddle with the computer connected to the satellite, and soon enough, the satellite started to spark, and this caused storm clouds to form above in the sky. Sensing the change in the weather that was coming, Bart's cast form changed form into its rain form. Bart sees this, and therefore knows that lightning was about to strike, as cast form only transformed when a storm was getting really bad, and knowing that lightning was about to strike, Bart advised all of his fellow scientists to drop down onto the ground, so they all fall to the ground with their faces down, and they huddle into like little balls to protect themselves. Team Rocket thought they were fucking idiots, wondering what they were doing, when suddenly Satellite, as programmed by Team Aqua when they activated it, shoots electricity at the storm clouds, which in turn release many lightning bolts. Basically, Team Aqua had created an artificial thunderstorm, and 3 of these lightning bolts fly down and electrocute Team Rocket, since they were still standing up, whereas the scientists were safe. Team Rocket falls down to the ground smoking as they finally realize why the researchers had ducked down, to protect themselves. Meanwhile, inside the Weather Institute control room, Ash and the gang and Millie had watched the entire situation of the scientists being captured and all that shit on the computer screen, and they also just saw Team Rocket get electrocuted on the computer screen. Millie wondered who the fuck Team Rocket even were, and reading Brock 2 simply explained that they were just Pokemon thieves. Millie got a bit concerned by this, but May and Max assured her that they were not an issue whatsoever, and if anything, Team Aqua was the real issue, since they were still active and not passed out. Millie knew this was true as they looked and saw Team Aqua messing with the weather satellite on the computer screen. What Ash and the gang didn't know, though, was that Team Aqua didn't just want to control the weather. They were also looking for information on the satellite's computer about some sort of ancient Pokemon. And Shelly asked the Grunt, who was operating the satellite computer, if he had found any information yet, but the Grunt denied this. Bart overheard this and realized that the only data on ancient Pokemon that the Weather Institute had was the 2 legendary Pokemon of Hoenn, Kyogre and Groudon, and Bart knew that if that data potentially fell into unworthy hands, then it could be used for something disastrous. Anyways, upon realizing that there was apparently no data on the satellite computer about Groudon or Kyogre, Shelly was pissed the fuck off, and she only got more pissed off when the Grunt suddenly interrupted Shelly's pissed off yelling, explaining that he had found something on the weather machine that was linked to the main computer that talked about the legendary Pokemon data, but explained that he couldn't get access to this data without a special pass card. And obviously, Team Aqua didn't have access to this pass card. The only person who had access to this pass card was the head scientist of the Weather Institute, which happened to be Bart. So Bart was the one who had the pass. Bart feared that Team Aqua may interrogate all the scientists to look for the pass, so he pulled out the pass from his pocket and wrapped it around his Castform's neck. He then orders Castform to get the card to Millie so that it would be safe inside the Weather Institute, where Team Aqua would likely be less inclined to look, since they probably believed that all the scientists were outside the Weather Institute. Castform nodded and floated off into the Institute. Upon seeing Castform going away, though, Shelly got suspicious that Castform may have had the pass and informed the Grunts that Castform was getting away, and she told her 2 Crawdons to try and stop the Castform by having them use Bubble Beam, although, in response, Bart had his Castform use Weather Ball, which smashes into one of the Crawdon and blows it back. Unfortunately, though, the other Crawdon was able to get its Bubble Beam off and scored a direct hit on Castform, knocking Castform to the ground. Just then, it seemed as though Team Aqua had lost control of the weather, since they weren't actively keeping the machine working and sending lightning into the clouds, since they were too focused on finding the data, so this caused the storm to stop and the sun to come out, which in turn caused Castform to change forms into its Sunny Day form, and in its new form, it launched a weather ball that was a full fire attack at Crawdon. Crawdon was entirely unaffected by the attack, though, as Shelly just laughed, explaining that as a water type, Crawdon wasn't affected by fire attacks that much. To make things worse for Castform, the Crawdon that it initially defeated had recovered and rejoined the battle, but Bart just told his Castform to get out of the battle immediately, and Castform nodded and floated away once again, turning back to its normal form as the sun dissipated and wasn't shining nearly as brightly, and Castform eventually made it to a air duct and went into the air duct, which took it inside of the Weather Institute. At this point, Shelly had seen Castform with the card and demanded that all her Grunts chase after Castform and go into the Weather Institute to retrieve the card, and they obliged, as most of the Grunts went inside the Weather Institute. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang and Millie were watching all this go down on the security cameras inside the Institute, so Millie knew that Castform was likely coming inside the Institute to deliver the card to her, so she declared that they had to get the card before Team Aqua did. Ash decided to take action and rushed off out of the control room to try and meet up with Castform and get the card. But May startles Ash when she yells at him, reminding him that Team Aqua was already in the Institute, so it was unwise to just go running. Ash slipped because he was so startled and fell on his ass, as May elaborated that instead of just running into action, they should come up with a plan to deal with Team Aqua in case they ran into them while looking for Castform. Millie suggests, however, that they actually didn't need to make a plan, as she had actually looked on one of the computers and had realized that all the vents were connected to the control room they were in, so since Castform went through a vent, it would inevitably show up in the control room, so going to Castform wasn't necessary. Castform would come to them. Just then, though, before Castform arrived, 2 Team Aqua Grunts, as well as a Crawdon, emerged through some sliding doors that had opened up, because the doors were automatic. Great security, guys. Anyways, with the 2 Aqua Grunts and Crawdon now in the control room, they immediately walked all the way through it, searching for Castform, while Ash and the gang were on the top level of the control room, hiding and watching the Aqua Grunts perform their search, not wanting to reveal themselves. Team Aqua was about to leave the control room, noticing that Castform wasn't in there, but since the room was so quiet, since Ash and the gang were not making any noise so as to not reveal themselves, the Grunts heard the sound of an air duct in the control room shaking, and soon enough, they managed to locate it and watched the shaking air duct as Castform came through it, now in the control room. Upon seeing Castform, the male Team Aqua Grunt ordered Crawdon to attack it with a crab hammer attack, and Crawdon rushed towards Castform, although Castform dodged by flying away, as Max called out to it, and Millie yelled for it to come over to them. Ash and the gang no longer cared about revealing themselves now that Castform was in the building. They just needed Castform to get to them immediately, and sure enough, Castform was able to get to them as Crawdon chased it. Eventually, Castform landed in Millie's arms, and Millie gladly took the pass card off of its neck. Now that Millie had the pass card, Team Aqua and their Crawdon set their sights on her as the two Aqua Grunts and Quaddon ran towards the stairs to go up to them. This led Millie to state that she had to get out of the control room so that Team Aqua couldn't get to her and get the pass. So, Ash instructs her, Brock, Max, and May to go and escape, while he and Pikachu distract Team Aqua. Everyone else agreed, and they rushed off, while Ash stayed behind. So, when the two grunts made it to the top of the stairs, Ash ordered Pikachu to use a Thunderbolt, and Pikachu shocked both the two grunts and Crawdon, who passed out on the floor. Ash praised Pikachu for doing a good job and cheered with joy that Team Aqua was down, although he decided to stay for a bit to make sure that they wouldn't get back up, and he looked out the hallway where everyone else had ran out of, and he and Pikachu both hoped that the pass card wouldn't be stolen, and they could all make it to safety. Meanwhile, in one of the hallways, more Aqua Grunts were searching for Castform, unaware of the fact that it no longer had the pass card. Anyways, as the Aqua Grunts walked down the ceiling, it was revealed as a air duct on the ceiling opened halfway that Millie and the rest of the gang, aside from Ash, were hiding out in the air duct, waiting for the Team Aqua Grunts to pass, and they had opened it a bit to make sure that the coast was clear. While inside the air duct, Brock suggested the plan, which was to get out of the air duct once all of Team Aqua passed, and then get outside the Weather Institute without being spotted, although he questioned how the fuck they were going to be able to do this, since there were Team Aqua Grunts everywhere. Although Millie stated that she actually had a different plan, a better plan. She was actually going to take the pass card to the main computer in the Institute, that for some reason wasn't in the control room. Apparently there was a super main computer that was like kind of kept super secret because it was so important or some shit, and once she was at the main computer, then she would make a copy of the data that was on the pass card, so then she could erase the data from both the pass card and the main computer, so that even if Team Aqua did manage to get the pass card, then the data would not be on the pass card or the main computer that Team Aqua knew how to access. It could be on like a spare floppy disk drive that she could have, and you know, that would basically prevent Team Aqua from getting any of the data. May, Max, and Brock agreed that this was a good idea, especially because that meant that they could use the pass card as a false bribery for Team Aqua. They could be like, oh, okay, Team Aqua, here's the pass card, but there'd actually be nothing on it. Millie and the rest of the gang then go to put this plan into action as they jump down from the air duct, thinking the coast was clear, and they begin to sneak down the hall, quietly, with Max in the lead. Max turned the corner first, though, but quickly went back against the wall, informing the others that two Team Aqua Grunts were just around the corner. The coast was not fucking clear. Millie was frustrated because now these two Team Aqua Grunts were blocking the way to the main computer room. We then see the two Team Aqua Grunts, one of them a girl with reddish brown hair, and another one a dude with regular brown hair, and the dude grunt was talking on a walkie-talkie to Shelly, informing her that they have yet to locate Castform, but they were nearing the main computer room. Then, the two grunts go into the computer room and don't see Castform in there either, so they leave the room, and the grunt informs Shelly that Castform was not in the computer room either. Shelly was frustrated, but she just ordered the grunts to continue searching, and they did so, making Brock question how the fuck they were going to be able to get past the Team Aqua Grunts, because they were just not leaving the area, and they weren't allowing Ash and the gang, because, you know, Ash wasn't there, to get to the computer room. But Millie declared that she had a plan, as she told her Ditto to transform into Castform. Brock, Max, and they were confused, as Millie whispered this to her Ditto, so they barely even understood what she said, so they were shocked to see what they thought was actually a Castform appear, but Millie clarified that this was, of course, her Ditto, and she then told her Ditto to bounce down the hallway as she gave it the pass card. Ditto obliged, as eventually the grunts noticed what they thought was actually a Castform with the pass card, and the grunts began to chase the Ditto as it continued down the hallway, therefore distracting them, allowing Brock, May, Millie, and Max and access to the main computer room. Although Brock got a bit confused, questioning why Millie had just willingly given up the pass card like that, but Millie confirmed that she decided that using the pass card as a distraction would be best now, because if she wiped the data from the main computer, it would also be wiped from the pass card automatically anyways, since the pass card was linked to the computer, so Team Aqua wouldn't actually have access to the data, like, at all, so long as they wiped the data from the computer, so they hurriedly rushed into the computer room to wipe the data. With Max still taking the lead, on the lookout for any other Aqua Grunts, but luckily, the coast was actually clear this time, so Max, May, Brock, and Millie actually managed to make it to the main computer room. Meanwhile, the Ditto, disguised as Castform was still running down another hallway as the two Aqua Grunts still gave chase, but then the Ditto, disguised as Castform, bumped into Ash, who had decided to leave the control room after realizing the grunts were fully knocked out, and he went to go find the others. The Ditto, disguised as Castform, was relieved to see someone that wasn't an enemy, like Ash, and immediately leaped into his arms, and Ash took Castform Ditto with him down another hallway, noticing that the Team Aqua Grunts were still chasing them. And Ash really ran as fast as he could because he didn't know that the Castform was actually a Ditto, so he genuinely thought that if this Ditto fell into Team Aqua's hands and they got the pass card, then everything would be disastrous. Meanwhile, in the computer room, Millie pulls out a floppy disk out of a drawer and inserts the floppy disk into the main computer and starts to make a copy of the data, transporting the data from the main computer to the floppy disk. Brock was curious as to what the data even was, leading Millie to explain that the data was insight to the location of the two legendary horned Pokemon, Groudon and Kyogre. Max was intrigued by this and wanted to learn more about Groudon and Kyogre. So as Brock held the real cast form, Millie explained that in ancient times, Groudon and Kyogre waged war against each other. Groudon constantly heated the earth and erupted volcanoes, while Kyogre brought immense downpours. But eventually, Groudon and Kyogre were both sealed away. We then see pictures of Groudon and Kyogre, as Millie adds that Groudon and Kyogre were not only in control of heat-related things and water-related things, but Groudon was actually thought to have created the land on the whole planet, and Kyogre was thought to have created the sea on the entire planet. May and Max were particularly amazed by the story of Groudon and Kyogre, and wished that they could see them, but their thoughts were soon interrupted, as Millie had finished copying the data from the main computer to the floppy disk, and then deleted the data from the main computer. And the computer confirmed this, as a deleted message showed up on screen. Brock then opens the door of the computer room to go outside, and he quickly looks both directions out in the hallway, and confirms that the coast was clear. There was no Team Aqua. So, with that, Brock, Max, May, and Millie rushed out of the computer room as quietly as they could, going through the hallway so as to not alert any Team Aqua members, but at the same time, Ash turned a corner in the same hallway and collided with Brock, knocking both Ash and Brock down, and sending both Castform and Castform Ditto to the ground, since Ash was holding Castform Ditto and Brock was holding the actual Castform. Ash immediately questioned why the fuck there was two Castform, leading Millie to explain that they fooled the Team Aqua grunts by using Ditto, since Ditto had transformed into a Castform, and Ditto confirmed this by transforming from its Castform disguise back to a regular Ditto, leading Ash to commend Millie on the cool trick involving Ditto disguising itself. Ash was then made fun of by Max, though, stating that as a trainer, Ash should have realized that Ditto was a fake the whole time. And I think this just proves that Ash couldn't tell that Ditto were disguised, if you remember the two episodes with Duplica. But anyways, Ash also gets yelled at by May for bringing the Ditto back to them, since, Ditto was supposed to be a distraction for Team Aqua, so that, they could all get away. But now that Ash had brought Ditto to May, Brock, Max, and Millie, this meant that the Team Aqua grunts were still chasing after Ash, believing that it was the actual cast form they were looking for, and sure enough, the Team Aqua grunts showed up. First being noticed by Pikachu, because he had fallen on the ground when Ash fell. Basically, Ash had led the Team Aqua grunts to everyone, because he thought that he was doing the right thing by returning what he thought was an actual cast form, but in reality, he should have just let Team Aqua grab it, because then they would have had the fake cast form. But it was too late now, so Ash tried to make up for his mistake by protecting everyone from the Team Aqua grunts by sending out his Torkoal, who came out in a thick smoke. This smoke already obscured the Team Aqua grunts' vision, but Ash decided to fully blind them by having Torkoal use a smokescreen, and since the grunts were blinded and unable to move since they were blinded, this allowed Ash and the gang and Millie to make a run for it outside of the Weather Institute, while Team Aqua were unable to give chase since they were blinded. Immediately upon exiting the Weather Institute, Ash and the gang arrived to the place where Team Aqua was keeping the scientists and Team Rocket hostage, since Team Aqua had captured Team Rocket again after they were electrocuted. Ash and the gang could care less that Team Rocket was captured, but they did feel bad for Bart and the rest of the scientists, so Ash demanded that Team Aqua let the scientists go, but Shelly refused and warned Ash and the gang that the scientists would only be set free once Team Aqua got the pass card. Basically, Shelly assumed that Ash and the gang still had the pass card since Castform was with them, and basically was demanding it from them, although Ash refused this. And the scientists refused as well, claiming that they would rather be captured for all eternity than give up the pass card, because, the scientists didn't know that the pass card actually had no fucking data on it. Seeing how Ash and the scientists had refused, Shelly realized she would have to go for more desperate measures, as she ordered one of the Aqua grunts to power up the weather control satellite. And Shelly explained her plan, stating that if the gang and Millie didn't turn over the pass card, then she would use the weather control satellite to conjure up a lightning storm and strike the captured scientists with it. To show that she wasn't fucking around, Shelly ordered one of the grunts to program the satellite to produce lightning, and the grunt did this, making dark clouds appear in the sky, and lightning came down. And Shelly declared that she was going to first demonstrate what a lightning storm would do to the scientists by having the lightning strike Team Rocket. Team Rocket freaked out at this, but before they could try and run away, Shelly managed to direct one of the lightning bolts with the help of the grunt towards Team Rocket, and this huge lightning bolt was enough to send all three of them blasting off at once. Ash and the gang and Millie were really shocked by the lightning's power, and Shelly just declared, reaffirming that if Ash and the gang didn't hand over the pass card, then she would mess around with the weather, with the satellites some more, either electrocuting them all with lightning or freezing them all with snow. Not just the scientists either now, but also Ash and the gang. Bart was unaware that Millie had deleted the data, so giving the pass card wouldn't even do shit. So Bart told Millie, trying to convince her to not give in and simply just escape away from Team Aqua and to leave the scientists. The most important thing was just to not let Shelly or Team Aqua have the pass card. Millie simply just stands there, saying nothing back. which makes Shelly impatient, as she just wanted the goddamn card. So she told the Team Aqua Grunt to turn the satellite back on and launch a lightning storm, but Millie stopped the Grunt and explained that she would hand over the pass card, much to everyone's shock. Well, Team Aqua's shocked anyways. Ash and the gang were not shocked at all, though they pretended to act like they were shocked, as Max questioned why Millie would give up the pass card. Because, Ash and the gang knew that there was nothing on the pass card, so it was just going to be used as like a fake-out for Team Aqua, but Team Aqua didn't know this. In response to what Max had questioned, Millie said that she had to give up the card because she couldn't allow her fellow scientists to get hurt, even if they were okay with that. So, Millie then tossed the pass card to Shelly, who then handed it to the Aqua Grunt, as Bart fell to his knees in disbelief that his apprentice Millie would give away their most valuable information. However, when the Grunt placed the card into the weather control satellite's computer and tries to access the main computer, he finds that the data was of course gone, which makes Ash and the gang smile. Shelly was enraged by this, realizing that the pass card must have been a fake one, and she asked what Millie and Ash and the gang did with the real one, as Millie then pulls out the floppy disk that she had copied the data onto and smiled, taunting Shelly that she would never get the information, as she then jumped to the top of the weather control satellite tower. I don't know how she had such good acrobatics and parkour skills, but she made it to the top, much to everyone's shock. Bart was especially shocked, questioning why Millie was taking the data and going up to the top of the satellite. In response, Millie just laughs as she explained that she no longer had to wear this stupid-ass disguise now that she had the data on the legendary Pokémon of Hoenn. Bart was even more confused by this, not understanding what the fuck Millie meant, as Millie just laughed some more and pulled off her disguise. She was wearing a disguise, and it was revealed that she was actually a guy named Brody, who was a male Team Magma admin. Ash and the gang was shocked at how fucking weird Brody looked, and they were also shocked noticing that this Ditto wasn't even Millie's after all, and Millie didn't even fucking exist. It was just Brody the whole time, and Shelly recognized Brody as a notorious Team Magma member, also recognizing him as a master of disguise. Max then came to the conclusion that the reason why Brock's flirting had failed earlier was because Brody was a dude, and not actually Millie, a girl. And I guess that implies that Brock wasn't gay, guys. Anyways, Shelly was determined to get the floppy disk from Brody, knowing that it actually had the data on it, as she ordered her two Crawdont to both use Bubble Beam on Brody and his Ditto, though Brody fought back, as he had his Ditto use Transform to transform into a Crawdont. So, when the two Crawdont launched Bubble Beams at the Ditto Crawdont, the Ditto Crawdont simply used two Bubble Beams of its own to hit both the Crawdonts, and basically, this stopped the Crawdonts from using their Bubble Beams. May then decided to join the fight to try and get the floppy disk back from both Brody and prevent Team Aqua from getting it, sending out her Combusken. However, as soon as Combusken went for its first attack on the Ditto Crawdont, a Sky Uppercut, the Ditto Crawdont countered with a Crab Hammer, stopping the Sky Uppercut and knocking out Combusken in one hit, forcing May to recall it, amazed at the Ditto Crawdont's Crab Hammer power. In the commotion of May's humiliating defeat, Brody watched as his Ditto transformed back into a Ditto and returned to his shoulder, and then Brody thanked it and then powered up a jetpack on his back, laughing evilly as he took off with the jetpack, still holding the floppy disk, escaping far away into the sky. Seeing Brody escape, Shelly tried to remain in good spirits, smiling as she told herself that the eternal war between Team Aqua and Team Magma was not over, and Team Aqua would triumph in the end, stating that Team Magma should appreciate that Team Aqua let them win this battle. Yeah, they totally let Team Magma win, but added that she was looking forward to beat Team Magma the next time they encountered each other. Shelly then declared to all her grunts that they now had nothing better to do than return to their main base, and told them to get back in the helicopter. They did so, and once everyone was in the helicopter, they took off back towards the Team Aqua base, wherever that was. With Team Aqua and Brody gone, Ash and the gang released all of the scientists from their ring restraints, although Bart was far from happy, as he was extremely sad that the Institute's data on the legendary Mons of Hoenn had been stolen, and that his apprentice Millie was actually not even Millie, and just a member of Team Magma. Just then, though, a woman arrived, introducing herself as Millie, and stating that she was ready for her first day, having a whole bunch of bags in her hand, apologizing for the delay. Ash then panics as he assumes that this Millie was a fake one as well, and just Brody in disguise again, but May stopped Ash when she noticed that Brock had now went up to Millie to flirt with her, and he wasn't hesitating or stopping at all. So, if Brock was flirting successfully, then Millie had to have been an actual girl, and the actual Millie this time. Max then, of course, pulled Brock away from his flirting by the ear. Bart then comes up and greets Millie, exclaiming that he was glad that she was real this time. Millie was confused by this, so Bart simply took Millie, as well as Ash and the gang, since they wanted to come along, into the Weather Institute, and they all explained to the real Millie that someone had basically disguised themselves as her, and stolen data on legendary Pokemon. How did Brody achieve his disguise? Well, let's just assume that maybe he saw Millie on her way, and was able to accurately replicate what she looked like. Anyways, after the introductions were made, Bart took Millie to a office full of papers and told her what her job as his apprentice was going to be, what her first job was going to be anyways. Basically, Bart explained that Millie was going to be working in this office full of papers that was extremely cluttered, and her job was going to be finding a whole bunch of data from all the papers and books in the room, and then putting it back onto the main computer in a secure way. Basically, all of the data that the Institute had on Groudon and Kyogre was written down on paper before it was converted onto the computer, because no one liked to use paper. But at least since it was on paper, they could simply just recopy it onto the computer. Although Bart did admit that because of how messy the office was, finding the papers and manually re-entering all the info on the paper into the computer would take quite some time, although Ash and the gang doubted that it would be possible at all. Despite this, Millie really wanted to impress her new boss Bart, so she declared that she would get started with her job right away, and Bart was so excited by Millie's determination that he decided to help her out. So, Millie and Bart excitedly went into the office, excited to sort through all the papers just because they were doing this together. Seeing this, Ash and May came to the conclusion that maybe Bart and Millie liked each other, and Max agreed with this. Max, Ash, and May were very happy for Millie and Bart, and the fact that Millie was real after all, so they could actually have a connection, although Brock was sad that he didn't have any chance to even interact really with the real Millie, and didn't really have any chance to become her boyfriend, since Bart was clearly her first option. Brock was so sad, he cried for minutes and minutes and minutes on end, while Bart and Millie were already making decent progress on sorting everything out. Ash, May, and Max just laughed at Brock getting rejected once again, although Ash begged Brock to quit crying and get a move on with the rest of the gang, because he wanted to get to his next gym fast in Fortree City, so he could finally earn his 6th gym badge, assuming he would win, and promising himself that he would. So, as Ash and the gang leave to continue on to Fortree City, we then see one last scene with Team Rocket, who had blasted off into the forest. Ironically though, a snow blizzard had now picked up in the forest completely independently, without any interference from the Weather Institute, and Team Rocket was trying their best to get through the blizzard, although it was a very slow process, causing them all to complain and curse the weather. Although they had hope that the storm would let up soon. Although, as they pressed on for hours and hours and hours on end into the night, and the storm didn't let up, they began to doubt that the storm would ever let up.